The air inside a maximum security prison is a dead thing. It's thick with the smell of disinfectant, sweat, and a low, simmering tension that you can feel in your bones. This is a world of concrete and steel, of echoing footsteps and the deafening slam of a cell door. In this brutal ecosystem, survival isn't just about being the strongest. It's about allegiance. And for some, that allegiance is sworn in blood. To join their ranks, you have to commit an act of violence, usually a murder, which creates a bond for life. A bond that can only be broken by death. This isn't just a gang. It's a syndicate, a brotherhood, a promise. This is the story of the Aryan Brotherhood, and the brutal code that makes them one of the most dangerous and sophisticated criminal organizations in America. They're known as the Brand. They make up less than 0.1% of the entire U.S. prison population. Yet federal authorities say they're responsible for a shocking 18% of all prison murders. Their motto is simple, absolute, and terrifying. Blood in, blood out. To get in, you spill blood. To get out, your blood is spilled. This isn't just a philosophy, it's a contract, sealed in violence. And it reaches far beyond the prison walls, directed by men who may never breathe free air again. To really understand the Aryan Brotherhood, you have to go back to 1964, to the powder keg of California's San Quentin State Prison. Before the 1960s, American prisons were racially segregated. When desegregation was forced upon them, the prison yards turned into battlegrounds. Inmates, stripped of their old social orders, started to segregate themselves, forming powerful gangs along racial lines just to survive. It was out of this chaos that a group of Irish bikers, who first called themselves the Diamond Tooth Gang for the shards of glass they'd sometimes put in their teeth, decided to get organized. They were reacting to the rise of rival black gangs, especially the powerful Black Guerrilla family. These white inmates felt exposed and outnumbered, so they banded together. They merged with other white cliques and took on a new name, one that would become a synonym for terror, both inside and outside the prison wire: the Aryan Brotherhood. From the very beginning, the group was built on white supremacist ideology. They took Nazi symbols, like the swastika and SS lightning bolts, and made them their own. Recruits were often forced to read Adolf Hitler's Mein Kampf, but this was never about politics or building some new world order. It was about survival, dominance, and control in the savage world of prison. The ideology was just a convenient flag for a much more practical and sinister organization to rally under. As one former high-ranking member later put it, it's a criminal organization. We need to be clear on that. Is there racism? You bet there's racism. Is it dominant? No. The true north of the Aryan Brotherhood was always power and profit. The entire foundation of the Aryan Brotherhood's power is its simple, unwavering, and terrifying entry requirement. That blood in, blood out motto. It's not a metaphor. To even be considered, a potential member has to make their bones. This almost always means committing an act of extreme violence, usually assaulting or murdering a rival gang member or even a corrections officer. It's a very calculated test of both loyalty and brutality. By making a recruit commit an irreversible act of violence, the gang accomplishes two things. First, they know the person is capable of the savagery they require, and second, that person is now tied to the gang forever, often with a new murder charge hanging over their head. A former commissioner for the Brotherhood, John Greshner, once described the gang's violence as a form of communication. For the Aryan Brotherhood, murder is a way to make a social statement, he said. If blacks attack whites, we send a message. We go pick one of their shot callers. We're going to butcher him in front of God and everybody at high noon in the middle of the yard. And it's not just going to be a few clean stab marks. It's going to be a vicious, brutal killing, because that's how brothers take care of business. Once a member has made his bones and been accepted, he swears a blood oath for life. There's no such thing as leaving the Brotherhood. The blood-out part of the creed is the gang's insurance policy against snitches and deserters. The only way you leave the Aryan Brotherhood is in a body bag. This lifelong commitment created a core of hardened, dedicated criminals who operated like they had nothing to lose. Because really, when you're already serving a life sentence, what more can the system do to you? It was this mindset that would transform the Brotherhood from a prison clique into a sprawling criminal empire. By the early 1970s, the Aryan Brotherhood's reputation for instant, brutal violence had cemented its power inside the California prison system. They were the muscle, the enforcers everyone feared. This reputation even drew in infamous figures. For a while, cult leader Charles Manson sought the Brotherhood's protection. He was ultimately denied full membership, reportedly because he wasn't willing to kill another inmate based on race. But the AB was nothing if not pragmatic. They used Manson's group of female followers on the outside to smuggle drugs and weapons into San Quentin. This was an early clue that the gang's focus was shifting. While the white supremacist ideas were still there, the main driver was quickly becoming profit. This pragmatism led to one of the most unlikely and powerful alliances in the American underworld. In 1972, the Aryan Brotherhood, a white supremacist gang, officially joined forces with the Mexican Mafia, also known as La M. On the surface, it made no sense, but in the ruthless world of prison politics, it was a perfect move. Both gangs had a common enemy in La Nuestra Familia, another powerful Latino gang. This alliance was a game-changer. It proved that the Aryan Brotherhood was willing to push its racial ideology aside when there was business to be done. For the AB, it was a strategic decision that massively expanded their influence and reach. They weren't just a white prison gang anymore. They were a key player in a complex web of organized crime. Some of the old-school members were disgusted, calling the group the Heroin Brotherhood, but the leadership knew where the real power was. Money had become the new ideology. The gang started to formalize its structure, knowing that chaos was bad for business. By the early 1980s, the old one-man, one-vote system was gone, replaced by a rigid, military-style hierarchy. This included a 12-man council and, at the very top, a 3-man commission to run all operations, approve hits, and direct the gang's growing criminal empire. The Aryan Brotherhood was now officially in the business of organized crime. With a formal structure locked in, the Aryan Brotherhood, now often just called the Brand, diversified its criminal portfolio with brutal efficiency. Their operations started to look like a dark mirror of a legitimate corporation, with money flowing from every corner of the prison economy and spilling out onto the streets. Drug trafficking became their #1 enterprise. They built sophisticated networks to move heroin and methamphetamine, not just inside prison walls, but in cities and towns all over the country. Members who were released were expected to keep working for the gang, acting as dealers and enforcers, and funneling a tax, a 20% cut of all their profits, back to the incarcerated leadership. Inside the prisons, their control was total. They ran extortion rackets, forcing other inmates to pay for protection. They had gambling rings and even ran inmate prostitution services. But their most infamous service was still murder for hire. Their reputation was so fearsome that even major crime figures came to them for help. In 1992, after being sentenced to life without parole, Gambino crime family boss John Gotti was sent to the federal prison in Marion, Illinois. After another inmate attacked him, Gotti allegedly hired the Aryan Brotherhood for protection and, later, to kill his attacker. This partnership gave the AB unprecedented power and connections, linking them directly to the American Mafia and raising their status from a prison gang to a national crime syndicate. The Brotherhood's influence spread like a virus as its leaders were transferred throughout the federal prison system. This created two separate but allied factions, the California Aryan Brotherhood and the federal system Aryan Brotherhood. A former leader called them two related but different crime families, each with its own ruling commission but working together as allies. The gang had effectively franchised its brand of terror nationwide. By 1983, the U.S. Penitentiary in Marion, Illinois was the most secure federal prison in the country, the replacement for Alcatraz, built to hold the worst of the worst. It was here that the Aryan Brotherhood would commit an act so brazen and violent that it would change the American prison system forever. Two of the most feared men at Marion were Aryan Brotherhood members Thomas "Terrible Tom" Silverstein and Clayton Fountain. The pair was already infamous for their savagery. They had previously killed an inmate named Robert Chappelle, and then, for an encore, stabbed his friend Raymond Cadillac Smith 67 times and dragged his body down the tier for everyone to see. Silverstein became convinced that a corrections officer named Merle Klutz was harassing him and spent months plotting his revenge. On October 22, 1983, the plan was set in motion. While being escorted from his cell to the shower, another inmate slipped Silverstein a handcuff key and a shank. Silverstein freed his hands and stabbed Officer Klutz around 40 times, killing him. Just hours later, in a separate but coordinated attack, Clayton Fountain used a similar tactic to kill another corrections officer, Robert Hoffman. It was the first time in federal prison history that two guards had been murdered on the same day. The message was crystal clear and absolutely terrifying. Even in the most secure prison in the country, shackled and under guard, the Aryan Brotherhood could kill anyone they wanted. The federal government's response was swift and total. Marion was put on a permanent lockdown that would last for 23 years. Inmates were confined to their cells for 23 hours a day, and almost all human contact was cut off. The Marion murders didn't just lock down one prison, they created the era of the Supermax prison. The lockdown at Marion became the blueprint for facilities like ADX Florence in Colorado, prisons designed for total, permanent isolation. The government believed this was the only way to control the uncontrollable leaders of gangs like the Aryan Brotherhood. They thought that by burying these men alive in concrete tombs, they could finally cut the head off the snake. They were dead wrong. The architects of the Supermax system completely underestimated the ingenuity and ruthlessness of the Aryan Brotherhood's leadership. Solitary confinement, which was designed to break a person's spirit and cut them off from the world, didn't stop them. From the deepest, most secure holes in the federal prison system, men like Barry the Baron Mills and Tyler the Hulk Bingham continued to run their violent empire. How? Their main tool was the contraband cell phone. These phones, somehow smuggled into the most secure prisons imaginable, became the command and control centers for a national criminal network. Using encrypted messages, coded language, and a network of corrupt staff and outside helpers, the AB Commission could order murders, direct drug trafficking, and manage the gang's money, all from behind walls of concrete and steel. As one U.S. attorney later said, the Aryan Brotherhood has maintained its deadly influence over members associates, and others both inside and outside prison. The gang's coded language was a complex mix of slang and metaphors. Bees and honey meant money. A pistol was laying from Bristol. Informants were called tit for tat. These codes, sent through texts or whispered over illegal phone calls, let the leadership direct a reign of terror while maintaining plausible deniability. This unseen empire was vast and incredibly violent. In 1997, Mills and Bingham allegedly ordered a race war against the D.C. Blacks, a rival prison gang, which resulted in multiple murders. They expanded their operations by absorbing smaller white supremacist gangs like the Dirty White Boys and Public Enemy No. 1 to act as their foot soldiers. From their isolated cells in ADX Florence, they controlled a criminal enterprise that stretched from California to the East Coast, proving that physical walls were no match for their will. For decades, law enforcement was fighting a losing battle. Prosecuting individual members for individual crimes was like cutting one head off a hydra. For every member sent down, another prospect was ready to make his bones and take his place. To truly cripple the brand, they needed a bigger weapon. They found it in the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, or RICO. The RICO Act was designed to take down organized crime by targeting the entire criminal enterprise, not just the low-level guys committing the crimes. On August 28, 2002, federal prosecutors unveiled a massive RICO indictment against dozens of the Aryan Brotherhood's top leaders, including the alleged heads of the commission, Barry Mills and Tyler Bingham. The indictment was the result of a decade-long investigation and accused the gang's leadership of orchestrating 32 murders and attempted murders as part of a nationwide raid. The 2006 RICO convictions left a power vacuum at the top of the Aryan Brotherhood, but the prison underworld hates a vacuum. A new generation of leaders, men already serving life sentences in California's most secure state prisons, rose to fill the void. Men like Ronald Renegade Yandel, William Slick Sylvester, Kenneth K-Dog Johnson, and Francis Spanky Clement grabbed the reins, operating with the same ruthless efficiency as their predecessors. Their command center was often a shared cell in California State Prison, Sacramento, an institution packed with the state's most violent inmates. And their number one weapon was, once again, the smuggled cell phone. With these phones, they orchestrated a criminal enterprise that made the old guard look almost quaint. They directed a massive heroin and methamphetamine trafficking operation on the streets of Sacramento and other California cities. They ordered hits, settled disputes, and controlled the gang's activities with a shocking level of detail. Evidence from later trials showed Yandel and Sylvester personally overseeing drug deals from their cell. Their control was absolute. An order from the commission was law. They decided who lived and who died, both inside and outside the walls. One inmate earned his AB membership by carrying out a murder in a highly restricted prison unit, an attack that required meticulous planning and prison-made weapons. It was a clear demonstration that even in the most controlled environments, the will of the commission was absolute. This new leadership proved to be just as brutal, if not more so, than the last. Federal authorities have traced a wave of violence back to them. Johnson and Clement were accused of ordering at least 5 murders on the streets of Los Angeles County. The victims were people who had either broken gang rules or owed money. Alan Roshansky and Ruslan Magomedgadjiev were found shot to death in Lomita in October 2020. Michael Brizendine was killed in Lancaster in February 2022. Just a few weeks later, in March 2022, James Yeagle Jr. and Ronnie Ennis Jr. were gunned down in Pomona. Prosecutors argued every one of these killings was ordered from behind prison walls by men with nothing more than a contraband phone. The fact that the Aryan Brotherhood's leadership could continue to operate from inside the most secure prisons exposed a huge flaw in the strategy of isolation. Contraband cell phones had made the physical walls of the supermax almost meaningless. For years, prison officials fought a losing battle. The phones just kept coming. During one parole hearing in 2022, it came out that defendant Kenneth Johnson had been caught with smuggled phones 8 separate times in the previous 3 years, with almost no real consequences. These phones were the lifeblood of the organization. They allowed leaders to micromanage drug deals, using outside associates, often women they called wives or girlfriends, to move drugs and collect cash. They used them to intimidate witnesses, corrupt officials, and order executions with the push of a button. The problem got so bad that law enforcement had to adapt, relying heavily on wiretaps of these illegal prison phones to build their cases. Realizing the state prison system couldn't contain these leaders, the federal government launched another round of massive RICO investigations. The goal wasn't just to convict them again. It was to get them transferred out of the California system and into the even more restrictive federal penitentiaries. The hope was that the U.S. Bureau of Prisons could succeed where California had failed. In April 2024, after a 9-week trial, a federal jury found Ronald Yandel and William Sylvester guilty of RICO conspiracy and murder. In December 2024, they were each sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms in federal prison. A separate trial wrapped up in February 2025, convicting Kenneth Johnson, Francis Clement, and another high-ranking member, John Stinson, of a sweeping racketeering conspiracy that included the 5 murders in Los Angeles County. In May 2025, Johnson and Clement were also sentenced to life in prison. The acting director of the ATF declared, "These sentences send a clear message. The walls of a prison do not shield violent gang leaders from justice." The convictions were a major blow to the brand, taking out the gang's entire California-based commission. But the question remains, will moving them into federal custody finally be enough to shut them down? Or will the ghost in the machine just find a new way to communicate? The story of the Aryan Brotherhood is a complex, brutal look into the world of organized crime and the systems that, in some ways, allow it to thrive. It's a story that keeps changing with every new indictment and every new act of violence. If you find these kinds of deep dives into crime and justice compelling, think about subscribing to our channel and hitting the notification bell. Your support lets us. The Aryan Brotherhood was born in the racial fires of prison desegregation back in the 1960s, created to be a shield for white inmates. But over 6 decades, it grew into something far more dangerous. A sophisticated, profit-driven crime syndicate that controls drug networks and orders murders from the most isolated cells in the United States. Its white supremacist ideology, while still part of its identity, often takes a back seat to the cold, hard cash of criminal enterprise. The gang's power comes from its simple, brutal code: blood in, blood out. This philosophy creates a level of loyalty and secrecy that's almost impossible for law enforcement to break through. The promise of a lifelong bond sealed with a violent crime and the threat of certain death for betrayal forges a commitment that prison walls just can't contain. Massive federal RICO prosecutions have managed to take down entire generations of the Brotherhood's leadership, from Barry Mills and Tyler Bingham in the 2000s to the California Commission in the 2020s. And yet, the organization survives. It adapts. It promotes new leaders. The very things that created the Aryan Brotherhood, violence, racial tension, and the hunger for power within a closed system, still exist in America's prisons today. And as long as they do, organizations like the Brand will continue to rise from the concrete floors. The war against them isn't just a war against individual criminals, but against a self-perpetuating cycle of violence, a code written not in law books, but in blood.